Hi, I'm Selena Lovett from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and welcome to our series of author interviews. And today I am here with Taylor Moore, who is a thriller author and also suspense. And for readers unfamiliar with your work, Taylor, could you give us a little description about what you write?
Yeah, it's a strange book series, I'll be honest with you, because it's sort of a suspense, it's thriller, but it's also mixed with a modern Western a little bit. So it's a little bit everywhere. It's kind of spy thriller meets, again, modern Western or neo-Western. So for those who like, I think the closest thing that it comes to is maybe CJ Box. For the readers
Mm.
of CJ Box, it's sort of it's a level of world building. I do this all in Texas, kind of like how CJ Box does in Wyoming. But it's setting's a big part of it. But yeah, I would say more of a yeah, sort of suspense, thriller, that type of thing.
And you're from Texas.
I'm from Texas. I'm writing about where I live, and so it makes it great for research. Although I am a little bit envious when I see, people traveling to Europe or Asia, or we have these great elaborate, trips planned to do their research, and mine's in my backyard. But it makes it convenient, it makes it fun, and people in the area really get into it, and I get a lot of help, so that's okay.
So, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
I think a lot of it is escapism. I think the thriller is a fun type of book because it allows you to sort of live vicariously through these characters to sort of approach this level of danger without actually being in it yourself. And for me, I mentioned CJ Box earlier. That was one of the things when I started reading his books. I love the world building, and I know it's not technically world building because the world exists, but the world doesn't exist for all of us, right? When he's writing about Wyoming, I've never been there, but I love what he did. He created this world that we could sort of dive into, and I think that's what's fun. If an author's doing their job, they're creating this world for the reader that allows them to sort of go into a place that they not may not be accustomed to, may have never been, and sort of live vicariously through those characters. And so to me, I think that's the big draw, is to have that sort of excitement, adventure, ability to travel without having to do that and maybe risk dying, or maybe it's a level of expense or whatever, a place in the world that you can't get. But I think these books really draw people in for that reason.
Hmm. So you're kind of creating a world within a world, really.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a world within a world. And again, we were talking earlier. I said, um, this is a place where I live. It's sort of my backyard, if you will, a little bit further than where I am. But these are people that I've actually met. These characters. Everybody always wants to know, is this based on someone for real? And I always say yes and no. Yes, it is, but it's usually three, four, five people come together. Culminate into this. A character that you're reading about. So there's that level of authenticity. So people are meeting people in these. Readers are meeting people in these books that really exist, but you probably in your world that you live in you may not come across someone who's been in federal prison before or something, or a cartel leader, or a Green Beret or something, something. I create this sort of characters within this world that people can meet, and that's one of the things I really try to do through the book series is write a character driven thriller. That's one of the things that people have really enjoyed about it. The other thing too, we talked about the world building, but it's that level, that setting. And I've had, multiple people tell me your character, your setting as a character in the novel. The Texas High Plains is a character, and that's one of the things that I really try to do within the series is make that come alive and make people wonder about this place, because in many ways the Texas High Plains is still the old Wild West. And I think there's for people who love westerns or people who don't love westerns, we've seen sort of this sort of resurgence with Yellowstone. Taylor Sheridan's big Yellowstone series, and I don't watch the series, but I mean, I know it's wildly popular, and I think it's just this idea that there's a place that still exists that's out there like this, that's sort of in the hinterlands, and we don't necessarily see it or think about it all the time, but it's out there, and people are living in this world. So to me, that's one of the most fun parts of writing this series is making that setting come alive for people.
So, what was actually, can you tell us a little bit more about your series?
Yeah, so it's based on my protagonist, a guy named Garrett Kohl, who's a DEA agent, deep cover DEA agent, who the book, I always like to people to go in a little bit fresh. I'll kind of tell you how it starts off, and then I always like to let people take it from there, so I don't ruin or give any spoilers. But basically, the book one, Downrange, starts off with Garrett Kohl, this former Green Beret turned deep covered DEA agent, is over in Afghanistan. He's in the Hindu Kush mountain range. Uh, he's out there trying to meet with someone that he's supposed to meet as part of the job, but ends up witnessing this massacre of a village by the Taliban. And he doesn't really know what to do. He's in this horrible position where he wants to help, but knows he's not supposed to be there, and knows that in all likelihood, he's by himself. He's going to die if he does something. But he is put in this position where this one little boy escapes the massacre and is about to get killed. And he acts in one moment. And that one moment changes the rest of of his life. And the series is sort of built off that. And so basically, he takes this boy and has to go on a protective custody assignment. So he takes him back to his ranch in the Texas High Plains, which is um, basically it's as secluded gets, but Garrett goes back because he has some fence mending to do, no pun intended, on the ranch. And it's there's a lot of family drama that goes on, and he's been estranged from his father and his brother, and there's been all this tragedy. And so the story sort of builds there. And then he basically goes from out of the frying pan and into the oven when he finds out that his brother has been working with the cartel. And so I'll kind of leave it at that. I'll kind of leave it at that, and sort of let the readers jump into this thing. But it's a fun series, and so each series is this protagonist who just wants to have a normal life. He just wants to leave all those things behind, get back to his ranch, and have love, life, a family, like what everybody wants. But unfortunately, I won't allow that because that would end the series. But he does make steps and he does progress, and so this series is an interesting one. I remember my first editor, David Highfill. He was a legend in the business. He's since retired, but he started Lee Child in the Jack Reacher series, and I remember him, us kind of discussing, where the series was going to go, and I remember us talking about it, him saying, it's like, how do we keep this thing going, and so the idea was to really dive into the family part of this, and where you get to know all the characters, not just Garrett, but everybody in the family has this sort of evolving storyline. And I remember David said, we're not going to call this a Garrett Cole thriller. We're going to call it a Garrett Cole novel. And if you look at the books, it always says a novel because it's so much more than a thriller. It's about family, it's about heart, it's about love and soul, and people trying to make the right decisions in life, people dealing and struggling with their past, tragedies that have, befallen this family. And I always like to say that, we talked about thrillers, and they're fun for a reason because they allow, most people haven't had to battle cartel assassins, right? Hopefully in your life. But
Hopefully.
I wanted to put yeah, right. But I wanted to put relatable themes into the book series, and so the sort of family drama, and people being estranged from a family or having a falling out, running into an old high school crush after many years, and people sort of figuring out who they are, maybe running from them problems, and then having to come back and face them. These are themes that carry out through the series. Being a good parent. How do you be a good parent? How do you overcome mistakes that you've made as a parent? So there's a lot of themes that run through the series on top of the sort of overarching fun and exciting bullets flying, bad guys. It's really a series about family.
Oh, great. Um, so your latest book is Ricochet.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Ricochet is a fun one, and it was a fun one to write. So that's book 3 in the series. It comes out August 29th. And it's going to be fun around here because it's based on there legitimately is a nuclear weapons facility here in the Texas High Plains, and it's my understanding it's the only assembly and disassembly facility in the United States. So here in the middle of this sort of Wild West, sort of Texas, no, middle of nowhere, you have this very high level, high security facility where that we have the most dangerous weapons in the world. And so again, I won't give too much
Right.
about it, but but basically Garrett is sort of summoned by one of his friends who knows of something bad that's going on there, and there's a person that's being blackmailed to give information on these nuclear weapons and some things that are going on. And if the situation gets worse and worse and worse, and so Garrett is sort of brought in to as sort of, he's DEA, but he's got connections to CIA and all that. And I write this, I'm former CIA. So for me, that's the sort of fun part is I have this sort of overarching CIA theme that is always sort of hovering over each book. And so Garrett tries to help out in the best way he can. Well, again, I always like to leave it a little bit fresh, but basically all hell breaks loose, and Garrett, who's sort of depending on everyone else to sort of help stop this potential nuclear devastation. It sort of all falls on him, and so anyhow, I'll sort of leave it at that because I think that's sort of
Okay.
fun to get in fresh, but. And I know this probably anybody listening probably thinks this is a bit too outlandish. It's not. It's scary. Sometimes, you write these things and people say, this seems like really wild. I'm like, you don't understand. I am sort of reining it in as to what could really happen given what's going on around here, whether it be the cartels or Russian mercenaries or, Iranian operatives or whatever, and nuclear weapon. It's all happening, and it's all happening right here. So I basically take these sort of real life stories that are going on and just put a fictionalized version of it together. But it's a fun one. My wife, I think, is the only one that's read it other than my editor or editors, and she said it's the best one yet. So we'll see what people think. But I'm excited to get it out there.
So, I think I know the answer to this one, but what was
Yeah.
the inspiration for your series?
Well, so I guess, my background
Yeah.
plays a big part of it. I'm from Texas, grew up on a farm and ranch here. I grew up in Central Texas, but did that for a number of years, and then went off to the CIA, and so a lot of it is based on the things that I encountered and experienced while I was there. After I left the CIA, I ended up becoming a military, defense contractor, doing military intelligence work on a contract level with the Army, and so I had this sort of broad ranging, I guess, experience at this point from intelligence to military, and then I even worked in the oil and gas industry as a landman at a point. So between the horses, the ranching, I just bring all this stuff together in this book series, which I think is good. I think people seem to enjoy the level of authenticity that I bring to it because I did it, and I think that's what makes it fun because these are real characters and real events, and maybe it's things are changed to sort of protect the innocent or whatever, or but for me, it's all about yeah, these were inspiring events for a young writer coming up, having experienced all these things, was just socking it away. And my imagination just went wild. And places like the Texas High Plains, have that like, foreign experience, but I have this too. And growing up, my favorite authors were guys like Nelson DeMille, Tom Clancy, but also loved Larry McMurtry and Cormac McCarthy. And so I just put it all together, right? And I know it's a strange combo, but somehow it seems to work.
So, what made you decide to become a writer?
I've always been interested. I probably never thought I would do this on a professional level, but I wrote the first book that I wrote was back in I think 1999 or 2000, maybe it was 2000, and I was working on my family's ranch, down in Central Texas, and it was more of a bucket list kind of a thing. I thought I want to write a novel, so I thought, okay, I did. I wrote one, and it just sort of sat in my computer. I was like, check the box, I did it, and but I always would kind of start a novel. This is kind of more when I was working in Intel and graduate school and all that. You were just so busy, you just didn't have time. But it wasn't really until I came back and I was working up on the high plains and I was working as a landman for these oil companies and I was going up on these big, huge ranches and it was just straight out of it was straight out of a novel or straight out of a movie or something. And so I started writing again. Just I think it was just an outlet for me at the time to be creative, never really thinking I was going to do this for a living. And then sort of as luck may have it, I rode the oil boom up and I busted right. You hear about the booms and busts, and I busted with it. And my wife asked me, she said, would you like to, you're always writing, would you like to try to give it a go and see what you could do? And I said, yeah, I'd like to try that. And so I did. And I was fortunate enough here in Amarillo. Two of my writing mentors are Jody Thomas and Linda Brody, two New York Times best-selling romance writers. And they took me under their wing. They brought me into their critique group and became mentors to me. And they sort of saw that I had the chops to be a writer, to do this professionally, but there was still a lot of work to be done. And Jody and Linda really helped me get to that level. And so if you notice some of the influences of Western romance writers in my books, it's because of Jody and Linda. You have them to blame or think, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, that's how that all came to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, since you had so much experience, did you have to do much research for your books?
Yes and no. I still do a lot of research. I'm constantly reading nonfiction, and it's usually sort of military intelligence kind of stuff that I really want to learn more and make sure I'm getting it right. Even though I've done a lot of that, I haven't done all of it. And so when I was writing about Afghanistan and things like that, I was, doing my research. Most of my research really comes from, the subject matter experts in either a particular field like geology, because I write about the oil and gas world. And so I have a geologist that's a friend, and I'll discuss things with him about the oil and gas industry if that's a subplot of one of the stories. I reach out to people in the special operations community, military community, for things like how to you know well, in the beginning of Ricochet, again, not to give anything away, but it starts off, I'm boarding a Russian mercenaries yacht from the ocean. And so I worked with a Navy SEAL who had done that. Like he literally, that's the kind of work that he did. So it was really fun. So we planned this thing as an actual, like we were CIA, SEAL operation. And so those are the guys who made sure I get all the technical details right. There's a lot of helicopter stuff in my book, so I have helicopter experts. Um, One guy's from the 160th military, what they call the Night Stalkers, which is a special operations air wing that we think about, in the Bin Laden raid, the guys that are in the
Mm.
helicopter, these are these guys. And so I'll consult them and say like, okay, I want to write this scene. What do I do? So there, I really, if there's border operations, I'll talk to Texas Rangers. I've talked to BORTAC, which is a special operations group from the Border Patrol. And so there's really reaching out to people or people that might live in a certain area. I'll set up a meeting and call them and just scribble notes, scribble notes, scribble notes. And because I want the details to be right. But a lot of it I do know personally, but a lot of it's comes from talking to people and getting their stories. And I want to get the feel right. I want to know what it feels like to be in this situation. So
Hmm. Right. So, what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out your series?
the biggest challenge, I think, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I guess the challenge is the challenge of life. Trying to fit everything um, into a year. I'm on a book a year cycle, which people think, oh, a year, that sounds like a lot of time. It's really not once you get into it. It's a very compressed timeline, and it's hard between editing the others, marketing, promoting, doing all the things you need to do, writing, research, editing, all that stuff culminates into I've worked pretty much 7 days a week. And then I have small children. I have a 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. I'm trying to be a good dad and a good husband and spend enough time doing whatever I'm doing with them and then trying to just focus on this. And I'm also a screenwriter. So I have other projects at any given time that are going on and they're taking my time and attention or working with other writers on plots and subplots and having meetings with folks out in Hollywood to see if we can sell it and all that kind of stuff. So it culminates into a very busy life. I tell people, um, when the people say, "Oh, it must be fun being a writer." And it is fun, but it's literally the hardest job I've ever had. And I've worked for the CIA, I've done all these different things, but this is the hardest job I've ever had by
Wow.
far, by far. And it's a constant deadline. People ask me, that want to do this, to say, well, remember that feeling you had in college or grad school or whatever it is, whenever, you had this big term paper due. And I was like, my life is one never ending term paper that's due. There's always some next thing. And I mark 10 things off my list and 10 more fill them. And that's okay. I'm not complaining about it, but it's hard. It's busy. So I think that the hardest part about this is just fitting it all in, just trying to do everything you want to do. And most writers are sort of perfectionists, and we want it to be just perfect, and it can't be, but you want it to be. And so that's frustrating.
Okay. So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
So so book three comes out August 29th, available for pre-order. I always like to tell everyone, if you think this sounds like something you might enjoy, of course the first two books are out there, and they are all read as standalones. So you don't necessarily have to read them all
Good.
together. But I always say, I guarantee you, if you read one of these, you're going to go back and start at the beginning, because you're gonna want to know, how did all these crazy characters come together in this wild way. And everything is based off something else. And even in almost every book, I think I take one character. You may hear one sentence about them, you might see one scene, and they may become a major character in the next book. And I do a lot of twists and turns. And so long answer to your question is, I'm working on book four. So after three comes out, I'll be turning in book four right around that same time, and then probably start writing book five. And hopefully this will be a long running series that people are going to enjoy. And I encourage people to nestle in, go back to book one and start it, because I guarantee you're gonna want to know. I pick up usually about 9 months later in each book. Like I said before, it's a thriller, so there's going to be a plot that you're going to get in and get excited about, but it's also about families' lives, and you're going to want to grow with them. And so yeah, I think the future for me is just to continue to write these novels and turn out good stories, and hopefully keep the reader entertained.
Great. Sounds wonderful. So I have some questions for you about being a writer. What
Yeah.
is your what is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's I like telling stories. I mean, it's what I do. There's that old expression: if you love what you're doing, you'll never work another day in your life. And I think writing for me is that. Now, that doesn't mean that days aren't extremely hard. It doesn't mean that there are times when I'm just don't want to do it anymore. But I think this is what I was called to do. I think this is what I was meant to do, and I've done a lot of different things, and this fits. That this feels right. The other thing I really love about doing what I'm doing, and this was a bit unexpected, was the writer community. It's a tight knit group, and I don't know. I know there's a level of competitiveness, I think, but within the thriller market that I'm writing, and the guys that I know, everybody is so good and so welcoming, and we've become such good friends that it's an unexpected joy that I have now.
Yeah, I know that the writer community everywhere that I've noticed has been really helpful to everybody else. But are there any groups or clubs or organizations that you would recommend to other writers that might have helped you?
So I'll always say, find a critique group locally, wherever you are. Find other writers, and I just can't tell you how important that is, to have a local community of writers. Now, that being said, something that everyone can do, and I can only speak for me as a thriller writer. International thriller writers, ITW, and the people that put on Thriller Fest. It is an absolute it is an absolute must for a thriller writer. If you're a thriller writer out there, and you haven't been to Thriller Fest, you just got to go. And I don't say that just sort of like as something to say. Thriller Fest, Craft Fest. I started at Craft Fest, and I'm going to be teaching at Craft Fest this year. Within 5 years, I went from the guy out there going, "I wonder if I can do this," to a guy coming back and teaching the class. And I owe a lot of that to ITW and the Thriller Fest sponsors, because that's where I started. That's where I got my agent. That's where I got my editor. That's where I got my community, my community of friends that are writers. These are the people that will ultimately, a lot of them that are big, if you do get published, will help endorse your book, which is a huge thing. These are friends that I've made through ITW and through Thriller Fest. So it's expensive. It's in New York. I know it. Everybody brings that up. I complain about it too, but it's just too good of an event and an organization not to be a part of it to pass up.
Wow, wow. I hadn't heard about that one. That's great.
It's a great one.
Okay, so what do you consider the most challenging part about being a writer and the whole writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Um, again, kind of going back to, I kind of mentioned just the hard part of life, of
Hmm.
just trying to fit it all in and get the job done. I would say one of the parts that can be hard, or I would give as advice to people, is run your own race. Well, on the one hand, I said, we're all this great community, and it's not cutthroat. In some ways, you can't help but once you get into this, compare yourself to other people, and because if you've gotten to the level where you are published with a major publisher or whatever, there is competition. You sort of recognize that it's out there, but and it's easy to sort of get down on yourself a little bit and think, well, I see this author. He's already at this. He's already on the New York Times bestseller list. He's sold this many. He's got a film deal. All these different things you can sort of look at, and there's a temptation to sort of get down on yourself, and think, well, do I really? I've gotten to this far, but can I get to that next level? I think that's a hard part sometimes, and mentally it can be frustrating. But I think what you just have to do is run your own race and go, look, I'm doing well. I've got my readership that love the books and are wanting more, and have to develop that. And so just to sort of manage your own expectations in a way of where you think you should be happy where you are, and just sort of make it very incremental, because if not, it can be very overwhelming. And the marketing publicity side can be a bit overwhelming, and you think, I could do more, I could do more. So it is an important part of the business, and you should be doing it. But at the end of the day, you're a writer. Tell good stories. That's what you need to do. And so I think that can be a hard or challenging part about the industry, is that it is tough, and it is tough to sort of break out of the pack and get your name out there. But at the end of the day, run your own race. Just do your best in what you're doing. Engage with your readership, and just enjoy the craft. Enjoy telling good stories.
Hmm. So, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh gosh, so many of my adventures came before the career. I've done all kinds of wild stuff, like I've been to Antarctica on a Russian research vessel. I've been through the jungles of Bolivia. I've climbed mountains. I've done all kinds of crazy stuff and backpacked through jungles. And so a lot of that sort of adventure was sort of built into things that I did younger. And then of course, CIA, you had all this, cool training and, opportunities to travel and do neat things. I really love, I guess one of my more fun things recently that I did specifically for the book was I went and learned how to shoot out of a helicopter. And like I said, I mentioned before, helicopters are a big part of it, and it's a
Hmm.
wild tale of Wild West. So I went up to a big ranch up in the Texas Panhandle, and this guy teaches shooting from a helicopter. You shoot these targets. So I was just flying through the air, shooting out of this helicopter, hanging out of this thing as the wind's blowing through my hair, and it was wild. I mean, it's wild enough to get up and be able to see this beautiful country and landscape, and then it's kind of cool enough just to be in a helicopter, and then you're also shooting out of it while hanging out of it. I mean, it was a wild adventure, and when I was done with it, I'd gone with a friend, and we kind of just were driving back in a daze, like, did we just really do that? But it was, you kind of just felt like it was a dream. So I think that was sort of a wild, fun adventure that helped me with the book experience, because I wanted to write authentically. There's things that people can tell you about, but to actually do it, to hang your head up that thing and see what it's like when you're looking down at the ground that's just passing. And no, it was wild, and it was fun.
Wow, I would say that you would have to do it before you could write about it.
There's some things you just have to do, and I think that was one of them.
That's incredible. Going back to what you were saying before about kind of do it, be your own, kind of be your own self, what piece of advice would you want to give to other writers?
Um, you know, there's a lot of different advice that I would give. I think one, this is specific to those. I would say if you want to be a published author, start and finish a book. And I know that sounds funny, but there's so many writers that have never finished a book. And that's where the rubber meets the road, because any of us can just start something. And I always joke, I mean, I do this every book. I create this wild set of problems. And then I get like three-quarters through, I'm like, oh no, like now I got to like make it all come together in a meaningful way. That's hard. It's extremely hard. So I say if you really want to be a published author, start and finish a book. It may not be the book you want to try to get an agent or sell, but start and finish a book. Now, I also say that with this caveat, if you just like writing, if writing is fun for you, start and never finish a million books. If this is just catharsis, if you just enjoy it and you want to do that and this is your hobby, then don't even bother with that. But if you really want to be a published author, start and finish a book. I can't tell you how many people told me when I wrote my first book, real authors at this time, I was just sort of playing around. They said, you don't know what an accomplishment it is to start and finish a book. So many people start them and never finish them. And so that's something to hold on to, that you can do it. It may not be a great book. It may be, a dumpster fire. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But you have started and completed this task. I think that's a good thing to do. But again, if this is just fun, do whatever you want to do, because it's all about you. It's all about your fun and your hobby and whatever. But for people who want to be published and are going to take this serious, at least get that first one done, and then trash it, start with another one, do whatever, but start and finish a book.
Okay. So what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Gosh, I've learned a lot of hard lessons. Uh, I think the lesson is, don't give up. Don't give up. If this is something you really want to do, don't get discouraged and don't give up, because I won't tell you the whole story about how I got here, but everybody always, I think it's classic. It happens in the music business. It happens to authors, actors. People always go, "This guy came out of nowhere." Well, they probably didn't, right? The band that came out of nowhere, probably, had five or six, albums before they had the one that hit or had the breakout. As an author, I wrote, I can't tell you how many. I think I rewrote my first book that I got my agent with 5 times. And then when I got my agent, he said, let's trash this book and start fresh. And so, yeah, you can imagine, right? You can imagine what that was like. And so I always jokingly, I tell this story, and it's like 2 in the afternoon. My agent's like, yeah, let's just start fresh with something new. And so I always joke, I was like 2 in the afternoon, I had to go get my scotch bottle out and, self-medicate and think, can I do this? But I joke, but so anyhow, I told my agent at the time, I was like, no, 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 I can't do this. I can't do this. And he said, well, think about it. We'll think about it. Well, I woke up like 3 or 4 the next morning. I couldn't sleep. I got up, came to my computer, and I wrote a chapter. It was a chapter in Downrange, and it was the best writing I'd ever done. It came out so smooth. I'd finally found my voice in doing this story that my agent wanted to do and not me, and that I'd resisted with all my heart. And so what I'm saying, what I tell people is, be open. Be if you really want this, don't let anything stop you. Be open to other people's opinions. There's times when you need to sort of dig in your heels and go like, no, this is, but those should be for the right reasons. Make sure you're doing things for the right reasons. But if you want to do this, don't give up and give it your all, because that decision to start fresh was the decision that became the Garrett Kohl series. And that was the hardest thing to do at the time, but it was the right thing to do. It was the best thing to do, and I'm so glad we did it.
I've heard from several authors that their agents and their editors really know what they're doing.
Yeah, my agent, of course, he knows this, and I've told him, I've thanked him for this, and he said, I don't always get it right, but because sometimes, hey, same thing. He goes, I've been in this business a long time, and he goes, I'm not saying I get it right every time, but I kind of know. I kind of, I have an idea of what needs to be done, and and he did. He absolutely, positively did. So sometimes, again, there's a time to dig in your heels, and then there's a time to be open, and that was a time to be open, and I wasn't immediately open. I'll have to admit. It took a glass of scotch and a night of sleeping on it, but it was the right call. So,
Yeah,
you know,
great.
yeah,
Okay. So now I have questions about you as a person. What is
okay.
one thing that most people don't realize about you?
But I think, of course, you read about my background and, CIA and travel the world, Antarctica, all these sort of wild and crazy and fun things. And now I'm writing this fun thriller series, and it's wild and over the top. And I think people sort of get this idea that you're out living adventures and doing all these things all the time. But I'm just a normal guy. Like I said, I'm a guy with an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, and just trying to be a good dad and a good husband. And I wake up every morning, make breakfast for the kids, and take them to gymnastics and tennis or whatever. And I'm living for the most part now. I just live a normal life and just a normal guy, just trying to write good stories um, and just entertain and just try to fit everything in life, just like everyone else. I'm going, how am I going to fit all this in? I'm just like everyone else, just trying to live a normal life.
Okay. So what question do you wish interviewers would ask you? And what would your answer be?
I think when I do, I'm getting ready to do a panel at Thriller Fest, and one of the questions that I'm going to ask, and it's one that I don't think people ask that often, but I think it's important for writers, is what feedback do you like to get do you like to receive most from your readers? My favorite is always, I couldn't put it down. When people write to me and say I couldn't put it down, that makes my day. It makes my week. It makes my life. Because obviously I'm writing thrillers and they're meant to be page turners. Um, but one of my favorite stories ever is a guy wrote to me and he said, I picked up your book, bought it, and I sat down about 8 or 9 o'clock at night to start reading. He said the next thing I knew, my kids were coming up to me wanting breakfast, and he had literally read it all night long. And that's a story that will always, be special to me. And I get a lot of those, and that's what I like. And I always say they're page turners by design. It's not just an accident. I work hard to keep people up late at night to get those done. So for me, I think every author has that sort of that thing that they want to know about. And so it's fun for me to talk to other authors. Like, what does it for you? What keeps you going when it gets hard and you're exhausted and your brain is dead? What's the sort of feedback that authors give you for, maybe good, maybe it's bad, that maybe they say that your writing's terrible, and that's the motivation. Usually not. It's usually something positive, but that's the sort of fun thing that I like to know about other
That's
authors.
that's great. That's a great question. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time for the
Yeah,
things that you love?
it's hard. Again, back to my wife and kids. I like to
Yeah.
spend time. I feel like I neglect them enough doing this job. So when I get free time, I like to do stuff with the kids. I'll go play tennis with my son, or just run around, ride bikes with the kids, and just like I said, just kind of normal stuff. I do, in terms of the research and the book stuff. I like to. I kind of jokingly say, I see these other authors that are out there. They're in Paris, they're in, somewhere really fun, Rio de Janeiro, somewhere doing their research. And here's my backyard. But honestly, I love it. I love to go out on big ranches and just see the horses, see the cattle, see all the beauty that surrounds them, meet the really cool people that either run these things or own them or work on them. It's just, you're meeting the salt of the earth of great people that I include in the story that people will see. And so for me, getting out there and taking these tours of ranches and seeing and eating in the restaurants and getting really great food, all of that, I just love jumping into that. And it's a great way for me to not only have fun, but to bring it back to the book series.
Okay. Do you ever bring your kids with you? Just out of curiosity.
I really don't, but I want to. I want to. I think there's been a time. I think they're getting old enough to do it now. There's a certain level, when kids are too young, they're going to just be
Yeah.
bored in a way. And I think they were at that point to where, like, because for me to get to where I need to go, it's 2 hours from where we live. Um, but um, but I think there's a point now where I want to take them camping. I want to take them out and really see these things and experience all that. And I think they're at an age where they'll start having fun. I think before they might have been like, "Why are we doing this?" But now I think they'll enjoy it.
Yeah. I think that would be great. Yeah. Um, so what does your writing space look like? And what
Uh,
do you need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
I have two different places. I'll either write in my office, which is what you see here, and have my huge screen. You can't see it. Mostly for editing. When I'm editing, I like my big screen. And but when I'm writing, sometimes I'll write at home, but usually I'll go off to a coffee house or something here in town. Um this kind of funny. I've had to switch coffee houses because after a while you get to know everyone, and so you don't end up getting anything done. So I have to find little places where I can, not that I'm famous. I mean, I'm not saying I'm famous. I just, like, people. It's a small town, and so you just start talking, and so I'll find places where nobody knows me and just go right. But I like the noise. I like I like having music. None of that distracts me. I can get in, and for some reason, the outside stuff makes me focus in further. So I'll just take my laptop and write. And like any good author, I usually have some coffee or something like that. And but that's what I like. I like being out somewhere and just sort of taking in the noise and the conversations and sort of tuning it out, and that helps me to tune into the story.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you can do that.
Well, there is a backstory to that. When I left the CIA, I started working with the military, and I went from this, for what was most part a pretty quiet environment, to working with soldiers. I used to work in this, like, facility where there were, I think, 75 soldiers at any given time, all in this sort of open area, sort of bullpen type thing, but it was all open. And when I first started that job, I thought I was going to have to quit because it was so loud and so noisy, and there's always like this commotion going on. I thought I was going to have to quit this job. But the brain is an unusual, it changes. It adapted, and it allowed me to sort of tune everything out and tune into what I need to do for my intelligence work. And so now that was something that has carried over into the book world. And so I sort of appreciate that noise and can it helps me focus in. I don't know why, but it does.
Huh. Wow. Okay. So writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions
Yeah.
to help them through their work. And do you have any? And do they help or hinder you?
Yeah, we have two cats actually, that are fairly new additions. I guess they're over, I don't know, maybe over a year old. And these cats are funny because they go out and prowl at night, and then they come into the house and sleep all day. And but they're really funny. Sometimes they'll just sort of disappear and you won't see them. And there are times when I'll go right in bed. I'll just, for some reason, I'll just want to sit in bed, and they're usually under the bed, and I can hear them roaming around or snoring or something. And then if they know I'm up there, one will come get at my feet, and so it's kind of fun. Being an author is it's a lonely job. In all honesty, it's a very lonely profession because you're typically by yourself, and so just having some other living things around is sort of nice. And I'll talk to them, and people would probably think I was crazy if they heard me talking to these cats, but I do.
Oh,
Even when they're
not at
sleeping, I'm
all.
still talking to them. So yeah, they'll open an eye and kind of look at me and be like, "Leave me alone. I've been out all night, hunting or something." And but it's fun. It's fun having these cats around. They're characters, so I enjoy it.
Yep, fun. Okay, now I just have two more questions for you. Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And of course, I have to talk about Annie's, and
Yeah.
you can get Taylor's books at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And we do mail orders, so you can just we will mail your books to you. And where else can people find your books?
Well, first and foremost, Annie's, if you're anywhere near, right? So go to
Yes, thank
Annie's if
you.
you're in the
In
area.
Worcester, Mass.
But yeah, anywhere books are sold for the most part is where you can find Downrange is the first, Firestorm is the second, Ricochet's coming out. Firestorm, I always love it. So I think Firestorm is in Hudson's and all the airport. So if you're in the airport, you happen to be traveling, find Firestorm. The paperback is out now, and that's my one of my favorite things. As a side note, is people used to ask me what kind of books you want to write. And I said, I want to write airport books. And people say, well, what's an airport book? It's like, the books you find in an airport. And so my dream has come true. The books are in the airports now, which is fun. And so if you're in an airport, go to a Hudson's and look for Firestorm. But anywhere books are sold, you can usually find Downrange or Firestorm online, or I always say support your local bookstore if you have one, and Barnes and Noble anywhere. So yeah, that's where you can find them.
Great. And my last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Yeah, well, go to taylormoorebooks.com. That's my page. Oh, speaking of the cats, I heard the door open and I see someone coming in here. Yeah, so you can go to taylormoorebooks.com and follow me on social media. That's usually the best way. I also have a newsletter, and I promise not to spam you or anything. I'll just kind of give the highlights and important things that are coming up. But social media is usually the best. So yeah, taylormoorebooks.com if you get on there, and it'll tell you a little bit more about me and more about the book series, and you can follow what I'm doing.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Taylor Moore.
Thanks.
Good
Yeah.
luck with your series, and good luck with Ricochet when it comes
Yeah.
out. Nice to
Thanks
have
so
you.
much for having me. This has been fun.